Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat class, Perashat Tese. We're almost mid Chodesh Elul, and we're getting there. Tese is always the first or second Shabbat in the month of Elul, and it is an amazing parasha because obviously, as we know, it has the most mizvot. There are more mizvot in Perashat Tese than any parasha in the entire Torah, but there's more than that. I would say that this parasha houses what we can call the most difficult, confusing mizvot in the Torah. In that, at surface level, it's really difficult to understand what the Torah's objective is with these mizvot. And I would say none more difficult to understand and perplexing than the very first mizvah in this mizvah Latin parasha. And we'll take ourselves through the first couple of pesukim of the parasha and speak about the Gentile captive. This is referring to an optional war. It's not a war of self-defense. And in the course of battle, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we are being told here, will give us the enemy, hand it over the enemy, will be victorious. And Shabita Shabyo, and as is conventional in warfare, you will take captives. V'ra'ita b'shabya eshet yefas to'ad v'hashakta baha v'lakachta lecha le'isha. Amongst the captives may be a woman. It says eshet, which implies even a married woman. She's Gentile. And she is attractive. And hashaktaba, you desire her. And the Torah says here, indeed, that being the case, there is a way that you'll be able to marry her, take her for a wife. And the following couple of Pesukim roll out the instructions that will be able to facilitate that eventual end point that you're trying to get to. Bring her into your house. Okay, here are the conditions. You have to first shave her head. She has to grow out her nails. In other words, she cannot groom herself properly. The Torah is instructing us to force her to look somewhat unappealing. And so she's going to dwell in your house for a month. She must remove the dress, the clothing of her captivity. In other words, she was wearing a nice clothing from whatever country from which she emanated. And instead, and this is where Hachamim, she has to wear quote unquote clothing of mourning, and she gets to mourn, cry literally over her parents for a month. Why is she crying over her parents? Because Hachamim tell us, besides the fact that she's physically separated from her parents, Hachamim tell us that part of this process is conversion, albeit forced conversion, but she's going to, so to speak, she's going to have to become part of the Jewish nation officially. And after all that, if you want to take her for a wife, after the period of her being somewhat disheveled and then mourning her parents in a complete month's time, you may take her for a wife. Besides the obvious question, let's just first try to understand what the objective here for the Torah's instructions is. Rashi, based on Hachamim, says quite simply that, as we mentioned already, she's being made to look unappealing, and somehow we're hoping that she'll be turned off from her, and you'll end up rejecting her. The Rambam says that these instructions are all about compassion. We have to understand that this is a woman that has just gone through shock and trauma. She may have had her family members perish in the war. She she herself survived, but she's been removed from her place of dwelling. we need to have some compassion and sensitivity to this person, give her due mourning period, allow her to get herself together, and be an empathetic human being. That's the Rambam in the Moreh Nebuchim. The Ramban similarly takes the compassion angle, but says that it's for a really a different reason. And that is due to the fact that she is going to be forced into an absolutely different life and lifestyle. We need to give her time to accept that separation, to accept the fact that she is going to have to leave whatever, you can say possibly pagan culture or other religion that she was part of. Obviously from her family, she won't be related, so to speak, anymore to her family. And based on the Bi'akiba and the Gemara, when it says here that she cries for Abiha, her father is talking about her previous false father. In other words, the other deity, whatever type of religion or paganism that she followed, she's cutting ties completely. And so the Ramban says we need to give her some time to accept that and digest that. Those are the practical reasons for this process. But above and beyond them all, we still need to stand with a very, very difficult perspective and ask, what is going on here? What's happening? And the Gemara in Masechet Kiddushin is quoted by Rashi right in the beginning, says that Dibera Torah keneged Yesar Hara. This teaches us that the Torah is addressing our evil inclination, to say basically that if this person, the soldier who's taken this captive, can't help himself, and he's going to engage in sin, he's going to, no matter what we say and do, take this woman to be his and engage with her in a violation of Torah and in a sinful manner, we might as well pave a legal path for him to be able to do so. And so she has to look unappealing, she has to go through mourning, wait a month, Chazak Baruch Mabruk, it's your lawfully wedded wife. That's the Gemara's explanation, but the truth is that I'm not sure how comforted you are by that explanation, but I think the average reader, if you stopped someone on the street and quoted the good Bible to him, who didn't know better and didn't know Torah Shebe'al Peh and didn't look into the commentaries, he would be absolutely perplexed. What's going on over here? First of all, we are paving a path for a Jew to marry a Gentile, albeit it's through conversion, really forced conversion. But is this the way that we envision the Jewish family forming? Secondly, this seems to be an approach that we could never imagine our Torah advocating. Really, we are giving up on this person. He's overcome by desire. He can't help himself. Really, the entire process seems to be predicated on failure. And we give in to his desire and therefore allow him to do what he intended to do because he's going to fail. So let's just cross the T's and dot the I's and find a legal way for him to fail. We would really think, and from everything we know about Hashem and the Torah and its attitude towards a person and towards sin, that we encourage, we beg a person to overcome his Yesar Hara. We hope and pray and even demand that he finds the strength to do so. What is going on with this mitzvah? And let's solicit some more sources from Torah Shebe'al Peh to try to help us. And I think it's going to, and by the way, I want to point out, point out something critical, and that is really you would think the opposite reaction from this individual in this situation. Here he just went through a victorious experience of war, where he might have witnessed Niseh Hashem, miracles and God's intervention, and he should be so overwhelmed with the feeling of gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and acknowledging God, and he's engaged in this petty sinfulness, almost this So we're going to quote now a critical sentence from the Sifrei, from the Midrash, that will at first maybe dig a hole a little more and then get us out of it. And that is as follows. The Pasuk says, Untano Adonai Elohecha be'yadecha, Hashem will put the enemy in your hand. Says the Midrash, Im asita koma ha'amur ba'inyan, if you follow the instructions that I'm giving you, Untano, then God will give you the enemy. Now, the truth is that all the instructions really are post-victory. So while the Midrash is making this a condition for victory, following the instructions, but as we read it in the text, we're living already post-victory. So how does this sentence and this interpretation of the Midrash jive with the actual sequence of events going on in the Perashat? And I believe the answer is very much in that line from the Midrash. And if you look a little closely at the Pasuk, the Kli Hakad points out something interesting, that it says that you'll go to war al oyebecha, not oyebcha, your enemy, in singular, but oyebecha, your enemies. And this really begins to segue into many derashot that you hear many rabbis and people making on the month of Elul about overcoming Yetzer Hara. And we know that there are different layers and levels of understanding Torah. Perashat, the textual analysis is what you begin with, and derasha, you derive deeper meaning from there. And then there's sod, which is a deeper layer, and there's remez, there's hinting. But there are times where the perashat sometimes, or the remez, the hint, sometimes can come very close to, even encroach upon the perashat. And I think this is one of those instances where the Torah says you're going to war against your enemy. And when you go to war, there are many demons and enemies that will overcome and challenge you besides just the physical opponent or in the other competing enemy army. And that is yourself, your own personal demons, as in many situations of life. And yes, the military battle is over. But as is the case with different crises that we experience in life, the trauma is not over. And we are really in a what you call a lingering process of trauma. So here the physical war is over, but the war lingers on. And as is the case in situations in life where we overcome the major blow, but we still have our own demons and we still have to overcome the trauma. And sometimes this has to do with just regular sinful behavior, where we stop, where we're always continually challenged. We are always, the Yetzer Hara works upon us, of course, all the time. And our weaknesses are exposed and they're taken advantage of, especially in situations where we could easily fall. We have the tendency to try to conform to the lifestyles and the norms around us. There's pressure to do so as well. And we have our basic, innate, physical, animalistic desires that we constantly have to overcome, especially in certain unique situations. So in this case, it's the captive woman case. And the war is over, but this person is still fighting. He's fighting his inclination. He's fighting his tendencies. He's overcome with lust. And the Torah maps out a plan for this individual and understand what these instructions are trying to do. What are the objectives of the steps that he's taking? And really, we can divide them into three, and each one has powerful implications. First of all, she must be made to be unappealing. She can't do herself. Her hair is off. It's the most attractive part of a woman. The nails, it's not well kept at all. She's disheveled. And that really gives us pause to think about the investment in materialism, and physical desire? Is it worth it? Is it a long-term investment? Did anyone have ever experienced something that's physically pleasing and then a year later or 10 years later reflect back on it and say, that was great? No, you lost it. It's over. It's gone. But the damage is done. Is that an investment, a physical investment such as that is worth it in the long term of our existence? This person comes face to face with ugly materialism and physical lust and desire, and gets a chance to rethink. Second, the person, the captive woman, gets a chance to mourn. And we have to look at her in our living room, crying for her parents over the course of a month. And we know the famous pasuk in the book of Kohelet, Tov lechet lebet aber melechet lebet mishteh. It is more advised and more beneficial and more productive for us to visit a house of mourning than to go to a party, to go to a wedding. Because as Kohelet tells us, Shlomo HaMelech so wisely, because when we attend a funeral and hear a eulogy and we go to a house of mourning, all of a sudden the big picture of life begins to form before our eyes. Perspective starts to change. We start to think about what life is all about and put components of our life in orders of priority. And here this person is given a chance to think about mourning, end of life, the brevity and the temporary fleeting nature of life. And in doing so, gets to think about whether this act is really worth it in the long run. And finally, 30 days, time. There's nothing like time. Time, not only to heal all wounds, but time can mend all mistakes. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu at this moment instructs us in his Torah, stall. That's my major strategy, stall. Give this person a time to breathe, to catch his breath, to stand back or sit down and think. Just think about it for a moment. Time lets us overcome anger and lets us overcome impulsive behavior. It allows us to gather ourselves and reconsider wrong decisions. And here, with this entire recipe put together, the Torah, where we thought was really facilitating a process that is predicated on failure, it ends up to be quite the contrary. This is the Torah HaKedushah providing us the tools necessary for our success. It actually is HaKadosh Baruch Hu calling from the rooftops and telling us that I believe in you, that you can do it. You can turn the tide. You can pull yourself out of the depths of the stupor, of the hole in which you dug for yourself. You can escape sin. You can come back to me. I believe in you. I know you can do it. I'm going to give you a few easy steps that if you follow them, you have a good shot. I'm facilitating your success. This is not the story of failure. This is the story of success. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu as our greatest cheerleader, calling out that I really believe in you, your ability to persevere and not to succumb to sin. And even if you do, to bounce back and to return and to come to your senses. And I'm going to help you do it. If you put out a finger, I'll stick out a hand. Just follow my HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Don't fail. Yes, it is true that this story of the captive woman, indeed, if the person still at the end decides to go through with it, yes, we allow him. Yes, we find a legal way for him to convert her and marry her. But it's unlikely to happen. In this same situation, it may happen. But this indeed is the paradigm for all difficult situations that we find ourselves, where we are drawn to sin, where we rationalize and we allow ourselves to slip and fall, where sometimes we're blinded and convince ourselves that it's not even sin. If you just allow yourself to keep to the script of Torah, to follow the rules. The Torah is therapeutic. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu paves the path for a person to come to his senses and to step back and to take perspective on life and to convince himself and see the truth that it's not worth it. The Torah, instead of what it seemed to be, a mitzvah predicated on failure, instead is a facilitator of success and a belief in people and the Jewish people and in us and his children in coming back to him. And this parasha, embedded always in the month of Elul, starting out with a mitzvah, that indeed tells us that you can overcome your enemies, physical enemies, but your demons and your difficulties and your weaknesses. I believe you can. I know you can, and I'm going to help you do it. Shabbat Shalom.